Welcome back to The Outright Effect, a podcast in which unique perspectives challenge us to be better versions of ourselves. I'm Tempsy.
I'm Shelly.
And today we're talking about leaving your legacy. Things like, what do you want to be known for? Who are you trying to leave a legacy to? And what do you want that legacy to be? This is kind of a heavy topic.
This is something that I've been not really like thinking deeply about lately, but something that has been coming to mind. And Tempsy and I were chatting about it and thought that it would be an interesting topic for us to talk about and bring into our podcast because I think there are a lot of different opinions, not only between myself and Tempsy, but a lot of other people out there on what their thoughts are about leaving a legacy or where they see themselves, what they want to be doing with their lives. And I think this definitely goes back to maybe even our first episode where we talk about purpose. This may not necessarily be specifically in regards to purpose, but just some of the things that we kind of feel like the thought of, what you leave behind sort of plays into what you do every day.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. I was going to say the exact same thing because you're not going to know what your legacy specifically is going to be until you've really found what it is that you want to do with your life, right? And so I feel like purpose almost has to come first, and then you can kind of really define your legacy. But I feel like in reflecting on this topic and taking some time to deeply think about it, I figured out in general what I want my legacy to be and who I want to um, leave my legacy for, right? So I think it's really interesting how that kind of thought process goes along, and then you kind of think of all these different things in your life that you want, and then you're like, wait, is that really me? That came up for me. I was like, okay, maybe this is who I want to be, but then I'm like, but is that me? I don't want to be somebody else. Like, I appreciate things out of other people, but I want to still be me. So what is my legacy going to be?
Yeah, and I think that's a really important thing to consider as you're thinking about this, any of you out there for your own lives. And so I'm gonna kick this off a little bit and talking about like my thoughts about this. And truthfully, this will come up a little bit later in this particular episode, but one of the reasons why this came up for me is kind of recognizing that I don't have any next of kin per se. Like, if I were to leave the planet, there is no automatic next in line where, all of my stuff would go to, just to put simply. But, before we get into a little bit more of those details, after I had thought about that in general, a question I asked myself was like, when I'm not around anymore, sorry, that's like, I feel like a weird thing to say,
Kind of morbid.
truthfully, right? Yeah. But, and this doesn't only go for that, but even in present day and in the next few years, what's the impression or like, how do I want to be perceived? Not saying like I care about like what people think of me or whatever, but I think, so like indirectly, that is something unconsciously that we think of. And something that sort of resonates with me, and this really comes from when I'm listening to interviews or TED Talks or, other people talking about things online. At the end of the day, I feel like I would want the impression of myself, like other people's impression of me, to be that I was like an insightful, knowledgeable person. And it feels so weird for me to say it, to be honest. Like, I almost feel like snobby. Like, I feel like that's kind of the negative connotation that comes with saying this kind of stuff. And I told someone that my general life goal is to be well-rounded and cultured. And when I say that, I feel like it sounds snobby. I don't think it should though, and that's just my own personal goal because so late slight detour, but lately when I've been traveling, I have been going to a lot of like museums and like historical places and that kind of stuff, and just kind of been like curious about like what's there. And definitely, totally would say when I was younger, I thought museums, not that they were dumb, but I wasn't really understanding the stuff that was in it. Like, I didn't like really feel the importance of the things around me. It was just like stuff. Like, this is just a building with like old stuff in it. But some of the places that I've gone to recently, like last year, about a year ago when I was traveling more, like let's say I had gone to London, and I went to New York and I went to like the Met and some of the other museums in London. And it was just interesting to see like really old stuff, like stuff older than I've ever seen before. Things from like ancient Egypt, these gigantic like paintings. And I just thought like, this painting is like 20 feet tall. Like, how did a person back in like the 1700s or whatever, like paint this thing and make like people look real? Like, I can't even draw, like, write in a straight line on a dry erase board, but this person was making like, this gigantic painting, like to scale. Like, how are they doing that? So, anyways, I found appreciation through that kind of way. And then I thought, like, you know what? I think generally speaking, I want to be a little bit more well rounded and cultured in that kind of way, right? So, anyways, it might sound snobby. I mean, I'm going to these museums and looking at all this old stuff. But I think, I also think it can lead to some interesting topics, um, when you're just having general discussions with people instead of like, this is what I went to the grocery store to buy today. I mean, it leads into a whole nother area. But I also want people to know me as somebody who lived my best life and enjoy what I did. My stretch goal, I'll say, is to motivate someone else or leave an impression on them, where they want to do something for themselves. Like they built enough courage to take a risk because they saw that I did. Although I'll be honest, right now, I'm not a super huge risk taker, but it's something that I'm working on. Clearly, we're making like this podcast and putting ourselves out there. And I think as like a side benefit, I feel like, I mean, I think maybe this is something that I need to get out of my head too, but I think there's like a bit of a parallel between like success and having material things. And maybe I need to like, forget the material things a little bit more. I mean, I like material things. I think we've discussed this previously where, I'm talking about my YouTube channel on a podcast, but I think that would be like the side thing. I don't want that to be the thing that I was known for. But if somebody was like, Shelly was well-rounded, cultured, and she had nice shoes, like I wouldn't be mad about that.
That's hilarious. I
But
mean,
yeah, anyways.
I get what you're saying about, I think the whole process of thinking about this made me feel a little like I could be coming off as snobby as well, because you're talking about leaving an impression. And some of the, when we think about that, we think about some of the most famous people in the world or some of the most innovative or, um, you know, inspirational people in the world. Those are people we consider to have left a legacy. But there are so many different kinds of legacies out there. It doesn't mean that, you have to be prolific and like this huge, public figure. It just means that, the people who do know you, you want to make sure you're building a life that reflects the things that you just mentioned. And so I can see how it felt like, oh my gosh, am I coming off snobby? Because I kind of felt the same way too when I was reflecting on it. So I was on mute, but I was laughing. Shelly can see me laughing, but nobody else can. So I just want to let you guys know I was definitely laughing because I felt the same way when I was, kind of writing this out. But we're not snobby people. We just want to think deeply about things, and this helps us set up our goals for the future. So I think, no shame, no shame in it.
Yeah, yeah. And truthfully, I mean, with that, like having no shame about it, I think that those are the people who are getting to these places that they want to go, right? Because they're kind of like, I mean, this is what I want to do. I'm going to do it regardless of what other people think about it. I'm still going to do it. So, something we should all keep in mind. But anyways, Tempsy, so why don't you talk about a little bit about, what leaving a legacy is for you?
Of course, I want to for sure leave my legacy for my son, and any other family members that I have, sure, but primarily for my son. But I do hope that one day my actions will benefit the greater good, primarily for children, because I mean, they're such an innocent product of their environment. And I hold a lot of empathy for children because, there's a lot of children who are born into difficult situations that they had no control over. And so I think that those few areas are probably going to be my focus. But in general, I want to be a creator of something. I haven't figured out exactly what. But I have various interests and ideas. And of course, we're doing this podcast, and that's like really help kicking these thought processes off so that I can get to that place eventually of what it is I want to build. But, you know, I want to build something that myself and others, like family members and friends, are proud of and proud to call me their family member or friend. Like things like real estate, investing in real estate, or maybe, building a restaurant, that successful restaurant, something entrepreneurial. I don't know what that is, but I just want to do something, for my family, a family business of some sort, and build it to be something respectable. That's all. Another thing that I was thinking about is, personality wise, I want to be known as kind of a reasonable, down to earth person. There were a few seasons in my life where I generally wasn't. And I look back on those times, and, I had to work really hard to get back to being that kind, reasonable, down to earth person. And one was in the restaurant industry. All servers who have been servers know that there's a time you become a jaded server. You get frustrated by, all of the frustrations and issues that come with the restaurant industry, and you just start to become jaded. It's very well known. And one person pointed it out to me. And so I said, you know what, I got to change that. I don't need to be a jaded person anymore. I'm going to try to get back to being that kind, reasonable individual. Um, and it's happened, another time where I'm, trying to protect people around me, and I just become jaded. And I think that it can easily take hold of you. It's so much easier to go into the negative than it is to go back into the positive. And I just want to be known as a, just a really positive, kind person. Um, that leads to like being enjoyable to be around, like making people laugh and feel joy, feel welcome and important. And this one is kind of like the one I was waver on, where I mentioned like I really appreciate people who are like this themselves. Is this me trying to be something that I'm not, or is this something that I really want to do as a person? So I feel like, you know, for now I'm just like really going to focus on this and see, like, I think you can tell when something is easy for you to do or if it takes a lot of energy out of you. And so I don't know, it feels natural to me to kind of make people giggle or smile, or with in Shelly's case, roll her eyes, because that's the way she laughs. But that's what I've told myself anyways. So I think that it's nice to just make people feel joy in any way, shape, or form. And then if I do end up getting back to leading people in the future, I really hope that I can lead in a way where people find me to be thoughtful, considerate, receptive to feedback, and a fair person, a fair leader. I hope they would feel somehow that they benefited from my leadership, and that I had a positive impact on or impression on their life, because, that really means that I am giving back to somebody else that somebody else had given to me. And I think that's important, because there have been mentors in my life that have given me good feedback and have had a great impression on my life. And I just kind of want to pay that forward, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing to mention. And that's kind of, I think where some of the points that I mentioned come from as well. Like, I'm watching these like TED Talks or, whatever it happens to be online, or like reading some article or like some book about something, and me being like, that's really cool that like this person can talk about, their interests, something that they care a lot about, and that kind of stuff. And it's like motivating other people to take action. I think that, is kind of like the power of having a platform. And that's something that, like, I think at one point I was like, I don't really understand what this like having a platform thing means, but I think that I think it's probably more apparent today than maybe like 10 or 15 years ago, when I was like kind of getting introduced to the concept of it. But I think today, I'm really noticing that like there's a lot of influencers and stuff on YouTube who are talking about these things that are important to them, and it's making other people take action. For example, like A few influencers that I watch, they're really into like caring for animals, looking for like cruelty-free options, adopting pets from animal shelters and stuff like that. And then a whole bunch of people in the comments are like wanting to do the same thing. And all they're really like, they're not actually saying like, hey guys, you got to go out there and do this thing, but just saying that I'm doing this because it's something that I want to do and I think it's important. And other people are kind of like following along. Like that's kind of where I'm like, I get what this platform thing is now. Like, you have the means to inspire other people to take action on something. And that's what I think is like really cool about that. But anywho's, another area of leaving a legacy that Tempsy and I were kind of chatting about was sort of in like the financial arena of like what does that look like for us later on in life, and that kind of stuff. So, Tempsy, you want to get us started with this part of the topic?
Sure. I mean, I think that yours is more interesting because you have a completely different perspective than I would say the majority of the population. But, mine's pretty typical. I want to make sure I have life insurance and other financial security for my son, right? But um, we're looking to build this over time. And if we're successful in our plans, we want to go beyond setting my son up for with what he needs. We'd love to give back to children in need in some way, shape, or form. I've talked in other podcasts um, about building some sort of sports structure where kids who are less fortunate can come for free and train jujitsu or train learn how to play soccer or be on a soccer team, things that my husband and I really love to do. But we've also been talking about other things that we can do to raise money and to help those in need. And we've noticed throughout this pandemic that we've had people, that we are familiar with that are struggling, and we have bought them groceries. So, and it's made us feel so good, right? My husband's doing the majority of it, and he's like, man, I just want to do this more for more people. And I think that if we can kind of build a nest egg for our family so that we're just comfortable, not extravagantly wealthy, but just comfortable, then we can expand on that by helping others. So the rest of it goes to the community around us and children in need, whatever that looks like, whatever we decide to do and how we decide to do it. I think financially we would want to put our money towards that if we are in a place to do so. One thing I wanted to mention is we wanted, in setting our son up for what he needs, we're actually going to take a different approach to paying for college. I'm not sure if I've ever talked about this, but we've heard of different situations. Like for me, I had to pay for all of my college. My family just didn't have the means for it, right? And so I had to get all of the loans and take care of it all myself. And then I know people who their parents just paid for everything. They paid for room and board, they paid for books, they paid like everything. And so somebody had once told me what they did with their kids was they told their kids, you need to go get your own loans. We don't have the means to pay for this. You need to, take care of it yourself. I'll be here if you have any questions. So they have to go, sign up for the FAFSA. They have to do all of that stuff on their own. And then once they graduated college, the kids didn't know this whole time. Once they graduated college, the parents then paid off their loans for them. And so I just thought, wow, what a great way to teach your kid to push through, have tenacity, get through, signing up for college, filling out everything you need to fill out, signing up for their FAFSA, like everything, right? That's a lot of work, and some parents do it for their children. I had to do it for myself, but I don't want my kid to have these school loans for as many years as I have. So I think, in terms of a financial legacy, if we have the financial means to do that for our son, I think it would be a great thing, a great gift to give to him. Not only the gift of following through on what you need to do to get into college and to manage the financial aspect of being in college, but then to not have to pay so much interest over a long period of time. And if you graduate, that's like your graduation gift. You know what I mean? Like, hey, no more payments every month. I think that would be really good. But something I'm not sure if I've discussed on the podcast before, but I think it's so interesting that it's worth bringing up again. But what about you, Shelley? What about you financially? What's your legacy going to be?
So for me, I think a little bit earlier in this episode, I mentioned that I don't have any next of kin. So like, I don't have any siblings. My family's pretty like dispersed. Like we're not really super close. I think we also talked about this in the finding community episode as well, where, I do have relatives, but we live kind of all over the place. So it's not people who I talk to frequently or I'm in touch with often. So me kind of being like the last person. And on another episode I talked about not having kids. So with all those things considered, I could have like a house and then I die one day or whatever. Sorry, I mean like just being real, but it has literally nowhere to go, right? Like I don't have anyone who I'm like, duh, I'm leaving it to that person or whatever. And so really where I kind of thought about this whole like leaving your legacy and where does it go to, this is kind of where it started. um I'm thinking like, hey, maybe I'm an old lady living in a house in my like 90s. I don't know. Like maybe it's just me by then. I have no idea. But what happens to that? If I'm a widow, what happens to it after that? And it's kind of funny because I have brought this up with a couple of my friends in the past where and other people where they suggest like, oh, can't you leave it to your dog? And I'm like, my dog is 5 years old and I would hope that I would live longer than the next several years of his life. Dogs don't live like super long. I wish they lived as long as I would, but unfortunately, that's just not how nature works. So where do I go from there, right? This is where I'm kind of like, sky's the limit. I can choose. It's like that book you read, like, where do you want your path to go? So, I do consider strongly donating things to charity after I go, like maybe like writing a bunch of charities into my will or whatever, just depending on like, if I am the last person standing, because, there is nobody else that I'm directly related to, right? Like maybe by marriage, but not like blood relation at this point. And not even that, because I probably mentioned on another episode that I'm adopted, but, but I think there are definitely a lot of influences here too, where people have thoughts about who you should be giving things to. You should keep it in your family and all that kind of stuff. But for me in my situation, when I'm thinking like, what are my other options? Charity is something that comes to mind. So something that I'm thinking is, having a trust need at some point, and especially because like Chris and I travel a lot together, like who knows what can happen in today's world, right? I mean, like planes are very reliable, but you never know. I mean, you do hear occasionally about like stuff happening, right? And if we're traveling together, we should probably have something put in place at some point, right? I mean, we're in our mid 30s, like why are we discussing this? But you can never be like not prepared, right? Like, I mean, you can never prepare enough. Like you should always be like thinking about what you can do. Um, but yeah, I've definitely thought about contributing to charities. Something that I know at some point I do need to do a bunch of research on, because I would say top two things today that I think are super important are the environment, like protecting nature and that kind of stuff, and then also protecting, well, animals are a part of nature too. So those are two things that I definitely want to look into. Maybe some kind of like nature conservatory kind of situation, or maybe it's going to be something specific. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe we won't have a pollution problem. I have no idea, so, and there's some greater need 30 years from now or more. But those are some things that have crossed my mind and stuff that I want to, start looking into. But I mean, yeah, I would say I'm thankful that I don't have to pay for anyone's tuition. Maybe one of these days, maybe, hey, you know what? Maybe it'll be different. And I'll be one of those people who are like, I want to give back to the high school that I graduated to and pay for some kids' tuition and give them a full ride. I don't know. Maybe that's something that I'll want to do later on. I mean, that's going to have to be a ton of money that I'll have to earn in order to afford that. But, that could be a thing too, right? Or maybe when I pass away, I'm kind of like, I don't know, like, I don't know, nature's fine. There's no pollution, and like all the animals are not going extinct anymore. Maybe I should pay for someone's tuition for high school. I don't know. I mean, who knows? I don't think those will be the cases then, but I mean, just thinking of ideas here.
Once all the world's problems are solved, then what?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, I have to come up with something. So, yeah, those are some things that have come to mind for me. Or even like, donating to like the college that I went to and help some kid like, finish up. school, because I mean, I think education is really important. I personally, I don't think I pushed myself as hard enough as I probably could have, as far as like abilities go, but I don't know, just was a little lazy back then. But education is still important. And if somebody would needed help paying for it and I didn't have anyone else to help, I guess I could help, some kid who is struggling with that. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, some interesting insights on leaving our legacy. And we want to hear from you folks. What are you thinking about for your future and what you want people to think about when they think of you, how they want to feel when they think of you, and what you want your legacy to be, who you want to leave it to? We would love to hear back from you guys. You can always find us at theoutrighteffect.com. Follow us on our social media accounts on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube now, all at The Outright Effect. You can also reach us by emailing us, theoutrighteffect@gmail.com. And thanks for listening to this episode of The Outright Effect. Bye.
Bye.